16 variants of this so-called virus called COVID. Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta, Delta Plus, Omicron, Omicron 1, Omicron 1.2, Omicron B, Omicron BX, Omicron BX 1.1, which was also known as Kraken. It's a circus. 16 different variants in 3 years. And don't forget that the first 2 years, when it was supposedly its most virulent, excess deaths actually fell in this country. A so-called pandemic with an average age of death in this country of 84.7, with a case fatality rate of 0.1 if you're under 60. We are not in a pandemic. We never were in a pandemic. And as long as you accept the government's response to this, they will keep pushing. They will keep chipping away at your freedoms and your children's freedoms. And as Lee said, history will judge this time. History will judge those who complied, and they will not judge them well. Because if you know something is wrong, and you don't act, what does that make you? We all know that there must be change. And that will only come about when enough people say no more. When enough people stand up and question the narrative. We want to know why your government spent $400 billion as part of the pandemic response package. We want to know why your own government spent $17 billion purchasing a product of which they knew nothing about. They purchased 255 million doses of a so-called vaccine of which there was no long-term data. And think about who supplied those products they call a vaccine. The biggest criminals in history. And these vaccines here only have provisional approval. They are provisionally approved, which means they are still in trial phase. A trial that has been pushed onto you, your family, your community. And who stood up for you? The government caved, the corporations caved, the unions caved. The only people who stood up are these people here. And we don't want to be here every Saturday. We've been here for 3 years. I would much rather be spending time with my family. I could be working. But I am deeply concerned about the future of this country. We have governments that do not have a mandate. They do not have popular approval. Every single government in this country, if you average it out, has around 1/3 of the popular vote. And they have implemented policies that have actually damaged the health of this community. So we're not talking about a policy regarding taxation or foreign relations or whether they want to increase the GST. Your government introduced policies that is making people sick. Just let that sink in. Your own government introduced policies and a product that is making people sick. You've all seen it. You all know somebody who's had an adverse reaction. I personally know 3 young men who worked for me who were hospitalised. One of my son's schoolmates, who's 12 years old, now has pericarditis. A worker of mine hasn't worked in over a year because of myocarditis. A league footballer this week was diagnosed with pericarditis. And we can hope this all just goes away. We can put our head in the sand and say, well, it doesn't really matter. But it does matter. Because when you damage the health of your own community, you should be held accountable. You should be charged. You should be put in jail. This is unprecedented across history. And for some reason, the community, enough of the community decided to accept what was happening, and they complied. And we all knew it was wrong. And I do have some understanding for those who had to comply, because the government said that you can't feed your family unless you comply. But unfortunately, those who thought they were working in the greater good actually had the opposite effect. If you really wanted to work in the greater good, enough people should have said no, and it would have all fallen over. It would never have happened. People wouldn't have got sick. People wouldn't have lost their business. The schools wouldn't have been closed for 2 years. This government put the health of children at risk. For what? To protect the elderly? Has that ever happened in history? Not that I can recall. Any society that decides it's okay to put your children's health at risk to protect the elderly is a failed society. And for some reason, our current democratic system has allowed that. So you must stand up, particularly the young men. Young men have always stood up when they knew something was wrong. But unfortunately, our government has given us the bread and circuses meme. It was said 2,000 years ago. Juvenal said, if we give them bread and circuses, the peasants will never revolt. They provide us bread, which is welfare. So they shut your business, but gave you the indignity of a government handout so you could feed your family. And the circus is the sports ball, the entertainment. And I understand entertainment's important, but why did they close gymnasiums, but they allowed the AFL to continue? They numbed us. They thought that if we are entertained, we won't have the will to resist. And that is exactly what happened. Bread and circuses. So please, don't ever forget what they have done to this country, to your children, to your business, to your community. And please stop complying. Question everything. Question your government and work towards holding those responsible to account. Thank you. Have a great day.